As we think about the upcoming sessions in 2017 and 2018, I want to discuss 4 guiding principles with you today. Issue number 1, let's make our good universities great. Over the past decade, thank you, Governor. Over the past decade or so, with nominal support from the legislature, our universities have significantly improved in their quality and in their reputation. Universities, to me, are special, exceptional places where students meet, they gather, they get to know one another, they plan, they dream, and these become our future entrepreneurs and our future creators. If you look around the country, if you see vibrant, sustainable economic development and high-paying jobs, you almost always see a strong university presence. And how about this for workforce development, which we hear a lot about today? This happens thousands of times on university campuses every year. As students walk across a graduation stage, they have a diploma in one hand and have a job offer in the other hand. My vision is for our universities in Florida, which are good, to go to the next level, to become national elite destination universities like the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University of Virginia, University of Michigan, the University of Texas at Austin. And just as students in Florida now apply to these universities and many times attend them, imagine a time when students from around the country will apply to Florida universities to come to Florida to get a great education at a national destination university. So what will it take us to get there? I've talked to our university presidents and I've asked them, and they tell me they need 3 things. Number 1, we need to recruit and retain the very best faculty. 2, we need to enhance our graduate schools and our professional schools. And 3, we need to address aging infrastructure on many of our campuses. It won't surprise you that I have a few ideas of my own. I'll just give you 3. Number 1, 2 years ago, we established the Benequisto Scholarship Program for National Merit Scholars in Florida who were being recruited to go out of state, and we wanted to keep them here in Florida if that was one of their options. And we now have 413 students on full National Merit Scholarships because of Senator Benequisto and her idea. I wanted to see us expand that so that we're competing for National Merit Scholars from other states to come into Florida. So that's number 1. Number 2 is I think it's important that every single student in Florida and every single family in Florida, that a student can obtain a higher education regardless of their economic circumstances. And so I'm proposing that we increase funding for our Florida Residents Access Grant and also for our Florida Student Assistance Grant to make sure that college and a university experience are available to everyone who qualifies and everyone who has earned the right to attend one of our universities. Thank you. And then finally, I would like to see us restore the academic scholar level of Bright Futures to the time and to the circumstances that we had before the Great Depression, when changes, of course, needed to be made and they properly were made. But I would like to see us, over time, restore the top level of the Bright Futures Scholarship to 100% of tuition, plus a $300 stipend for textbooks, and that's one of my goals. All in, counting tuition, counting state support, North Carolina spends about twice as much as Florida does on its universities. Virginia spends 50% more. So while money isn't everything, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And I have no interest in building administrative castles. I don't want to build bureaucracy. I want all new funding to go directly to programs that benefit students in the classroom and also benefit them after they graduate and go on to live productive lives. So with that understanding, over a 2-year period during the 2017 and 2018 sessions, I will propose that we fund an additional $1 billion to our universities for performance funding and for preeminence funding to make our good universities great. Thank you. Issue number 2, let's solve the Lake Okeechobee dilemma. In the summer of 2013, there was near historic levels of rainfall in South Florida, and Lake Okeechobee rose to levels where the Army Corps of Engineers made the decision to have massive releases east and west in order to protect the integrity of the dike. And in the community that I represent, 136 billion gallons of water was sent from Lake Okeechobee into the St. Lucie River and the Indian River Lagoon. It also had an adverse effect on Southwest Florida, with water going out the Caloosahatchee to the Fort Myers area. And our community came together, and this Senate stepped up. And President Gates appointed a select committee. We met in Stewart, and I promised people measurable progress in reasonable time. The then Speaker of the House, Speaker Weatherford, also came to our community to visit. We had a group called the River Kids, who were young people who came together to support our efforts. There was some excellent reporting by the Stewart News on this issue that led to not only local coverage, but also state coverage and national coverage. It was very effective in bringing the attention of the state to our issue. We funded $231 million in projects. These were not studies. They were not groups getting around to talk about what to do. These are tangible things. Thanks to Governor Scott's support, we're bridging 2.5 miles of the Tamiami Trail so that water can flow south from Everglades National Park into Florida Bay, and that's going to be a huge step in the right direction. We just broke ground on the C-44 reservoir, which will store basin runoff and also assist us in not having water go into the lake. My goal is, before I finish my term in the Senate and pack up boxes, put them in the Jeep, and head back to Stewart, I have a personal mission, and that is to work with the agricultural community, to work with Florida's best scientists, to work with all of us as a legislature who have background and knowledge on this issue, that we will permanently protect our estuaries, protect our lagoons, come up with a way to not have these terrible discharges from Lake Okeechobee that destroy our environment. That's one of my goals. Thank you very much. Thank you, Governor. This isn't just a South Florida or a Treasure Coast issue. If you take a map of Florida and you draw a line across the state of Florida at the northern boundary of Lake Okeechobee, 8 million of the 20 million people who live in Florida live below that line. So it affects most of the state. In addition, as President Gardner knows, we're inextricably linked with the Orange County and the Orlando and the Central Florida area through the Kissimmee River. And I appreciate everything that the Central Florida community has done, and also the area that has springs, to take steps that have been done this session, and I know will continue under Speaker Crisafulli and President Gardner this session, to make sure that we have a water policy that protects our environment. Issue number 3, let's not criminalize adolescents. When I was 13 or 14 years old, my brothers and I, 2 of them, had come up with a really ingenious way to pass some time on a lazy summer afternoon in West Palm Beach, Florida. We made a dozen water balloons, we put them in a box, we secreted ourselves behind a cabbage palm tree, and then we were going to lob these water balloons in the general direction of cars that would occasionally pass by Military Trail where we lived. And this was very entertaining. For those of you who've played softball with me, you'll know that usually we missed. But on one of the times, I nailed a car right on the side door panel, and we were exuberant, thought this was great, until the car stopped in the middle of the road, backed up, and a very tall, frightening-looking gentleman got out. He walked straight up, looked me in the eye, and flipped down his badge and said, "Son, you hit the wrong car." And he marched us up to my father, told him what happened, and suffice it to say, that never happened again. Grand opening, grand closing. Now, take that same factual circumstance and fact pattern and transfer it to today. It's a virtual certainty that we would have been arrested. We would have been charged with throwing a deadly missile at a conveyance, which I'm sure the legislature has turned into a second-degree felony with enhanced penalties. We would have been thrown into the juvenile justice system. Our family would have been declared dysfunctional. The other 4 Negron children, the younger siblings, would have been declared to be at additional risk due to their miscreant brothers, and they would have been signed up for all sorts of wraparound services. I would still be explaining this on my Florida bar application, trying to get a license to practice law from the Board of Bar Examiners. There's a delicate balance here. We should not and we will not tolerate serious wrongdoing by young people, but at the same time, let's not criminalize adolescents. Issue number 4, let's embrace the Constitution. The majority of men and women, thank you. The majority of men and women who have ever lived have lived under tyranny. And there have been all kinds of rationales to explain this, from divine right of kings to power of the sword to group superiority. But that's the way things were for the vast majority of people who've ever lived. Then the Enlightenment comes to Europe. People like Rousseau and John Locke came up with what was really a subversive, radical idea, which was that in order for a government to be legitimate, it needed to have the consent of the governed. And John Locke called this the social contract. And those ideas came across and were exported across the Atlantic to Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, James Madison, who wrote the Bill of Rights. And these rights are extravagant: freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to a trial by jury, the right to confront witnesses against you, the right to due process. They had a profound idea that these rights were not a bequest from the government to us, but rather they were an endowment from our Creator. And the government didn't give us the rights, and the government can't take them away. And so with those rights and with those constitutional limitations, we legislate in boundaries. And let me mention 2 points that are related to this. There are some people in the process who view our constituents as feeble and faltering, in need of our constant supervision, our advice, our guidance. I do not see our constituents that way. I think they are strong. I think they're resilient. I believe in the supremacy of the individual. Secondly, there's a temptation, and by the way, it affects me as well, it's with all of us, that we lose some of our skepticism and wariness about government because now we are part of the government. And we all probably need to be reminded of the admonition from the Apostle Paul in Romans that a man should not think of himself more highly than he ought. We don't have all the answers. We're not overseeing anybody. Any power we have is 100% derivative from the people that we serve. And it's important to always remember that the people are in charge, we're here to serve, and the citizens remain sovereign.